Hi, good morning, good evening, and welcome to the first of the novel solutions for novel times. What we're here to talk about is from the Retail Blockchain Consortium, and we're going to talk about the impacts of the current issues, the coronavirus and the rest of the crisis that's happening at the moment, and how that affects supply chain and retail. My name is Antony. I'm Managing Director of the Blockchain Practice at DXC Technology. And next to my colleague, so Paolo, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Yes, as you say, my name is Paolo Tasca. I'm Italian by origin, and I'm the Executive Director of the University College London Center for Blockchain Technologies, and I'm happy to be here with you guys and share my thoughts today with you on this situation.
Hi guys, my name's Najib. I work for FarmaTrust and I'm the data strategy lead. We're a software solution provider for supply logistics in healthcare, and likewise I'm equally here happy to be chatting about all things COVID and what that means for our supply operations.
Geri?
Hi everyone, my name is Geri Cupi. I'm co-founder and CEO of MonoChain, a blockchain platform focused in the luxury market.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikhil Vadgama. I'm the Deputy Director of the UCL Center for Blockchain Technologies, and here to talk a bit about automation.
Excellent. So thank you everyone, and just to say at the start, we're not experts, we're not giving you any advice or lectures. What we're going to just talk about is our views as people working in this area and working with blockchain technology especially, on what's happening and some of the things that may or may not happen in the future. So we'll keep this first session to around half an hour, and I'll kick it off with Najib, who's going to sort of talk a bit bigger about the healthcare pharmaceuticals and sort of the whole supply chain issue of what's happening, you know, that we've all seen in the press. So over to Najib.
Thanks, Anthony. So yes, I suppose I just want to really introduce the ideas and the challenges that we're now beginning to see, and we'll get the panel to input into what their perspective is on this as well. But for a company that has been looking at this now, using novel technologies, blockchain, ML, machine learning, and working with IoT as well, we've been talking about some of these things for quite some time. Challenges within the healthcare supply chains, be it for drugs, for equipment such as PPE, med devices, technologies, including equipment like ventilators and so on, but pretty much everything else as well. What we've seen is that there is a huge challenge within the resilience of all of these operations. And unfortunately, with the pandemic as it is right now, we're beginning to see that that very resilience is being tested to the max, to the point where we can clearly see in some countries now we're running very short of critical drugs, life-saving drugs, equipment as well, and clearly PPE. PPE arguably probably one of the most important things, because you know that if we can protect those that are on the front line with that equipment, then we're less likely to see the spread of the disease into the wider community, because that really is where the vulnerability probably for the spread of the disease lies right now. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that what the pandemic has clearly done is bring those vulnerabilities of the resilience of our supply chains to the front line. And we can see that where we've not done a good enough job ensuring that we can show resilience in terms of ability to source raw materials such as the APIs for drugs from various locations, different locations where we're dependent on a handful of countries. This means that we're going to invariably see
so is this sort of, so what you're saying is we've globalized our supply chains, and you just mentioned it then, one of the biggest issues is that we're going to one or two suppliers in one or two countries as a globe, as every single country is now trying to get, say, these masks that we hear many times a day about. There's only a few places that are making these. Is that correct, that we've now gone to a supply chain that's only a few key countries, key suppliers can make these things?
Well, maybe not so much in manufacturing, but the manufacturing is dependent on the raw materials from probably a handful of suppliers.
Yeah.
So certainly I can talk with more knowledge about the APIs within drugs, so the active ingredients that make a drug work. You know, most of those really do honestly come from India and China, as we all know. And if those sources dry up, I mean, the US is seeing that, we're seeing that in Europe now. The number of drugs that are hitting the shortages lists of most regulators right now are critical for frontline operations.
And because our supply chains are global, we've in essence, as a world, closed down all our borders. So in essence, most countries are in some form of lockdown, from very extreme to less extreme. But in essence, you know, we're all in this serious lockdown phase, which economically is challenging, and Paolo will talk about that in a second. But how are we managing then to get supplies working? How is the supply chain, you know, is it broken now? Is it totally broken, or is it, where is it in terms of the you know, what you'd categorize it as?
Well, it seems that the fallback for many countries, and certainly we've seen it here in the UK, is to revert to the military in some cases, or to take charge. So governments will move towards nationalising of critical operations. You know, the government in the US have been talking about taking control of manufacturing for ventilators and so on. So what seems to be happening is that we're getting more authoritarian reactions to our supply chains that are critical, and understandably so. It goes back to the fact that commercial supply chains have, for whatever reasons, and we've sort of alluded to the as possibly being one of the fuels, fuel being quite topical at the moment with the price of petrol. But yeah, the globalization being a fuel for why we've ended up with such poor resilience in our supply chains. And commercial operations are driven by profit. Thin margins have meant that they are looking to maximize where they can, and it causes a perversion of incentive in that sense. So governments are having to take extreme measures. So for PPE,
how does that affect a commercial retailer and a commercial supply chain? So let's take Walgreens in the US or Boots in the UK. You know, pharmaceutical chemists. You know, surely they should be able to carry on sourcing their drugs and what they need. Or does the government now need to step in and, you know, take over? And so does that mean that our chemists are now nationalised? What, you know, if the government's taking over the supply chain, what's going to happen next?
De facto, potentially, yes. I mean, there's still going to be commercial operations. You know, the retailers and the wholesalers will operate as independent, but as the raw materials for those products begin to dry up, and let's, I don't want to bring in the B word of only what feels like years ago now, it's only months, Brexit. We were fortunate that we stockpiled, but even that isn't going to last forever. Clearly not so, because our regulator has increased the number of restricted export drugs quite significantly. I think 80 plus drugs in the last month alone have been added to that list. So well, yes.
So part of this though is, and I want to get on to a bit about the economy as well, because you know, part of this is that we're locking down our people and our services and all those sorts of things, and we're bailing things out as well as giving money to people, although that's not happening properly yet, but the governments they are. It just seems as though we've taken over everything, we've closed everything. This is a small proportion of people die as a percentage of the global population from this. Is this an overreaction, closing everything down and destroying global supply chains? Or is this the right thing? Maybe not saying right and wrong, but in your opinion, is this an overreaction?
I think it's difficult to say right now, and only time will tell. I mean, look, the numbers that we're seeing in terms of death, even with the tight restrictions that we're all experiencing, are significant. You know, tens of thousands of people have basically died in a very short space of time. The volume of people that are dying, I mean, even if it's 1 or 2%, and we don't know if that's the case, it could be anywhere between 0.5% to 4%, the mortality from this current pandemic. That's going to be a lot of people to die in a very short space of time, potentially. I think it's probably the right thing to do. It's a case of how do we now work out a way to manage the suppression with the ability to open up the economy. And I know that those on the panel feel that we're probably
so let's
coming
bring
too
Paolo,
hard with the hammer.
because there is the opposite side of this, which is the solution, the lockdown, costing us billions, literally billions, and building debt and destroying our economies. Is that the right thing to do, Paolo?
Yeah, basically, I think, thank you, Anthony. I mean, I think that the situation is really dramatic. It's really dramatic, but I'm starting from the end. I'm not starting from the beginning. I'm starting from the end, which basically would be the results of tens of millions of unemployed people and an increase of mental disease and suicide rates. And during the Great Recessions in 2008, the number of suicides skyrocketed of about a few thousands, tens of thousands globally.
Yeah.
So these are basically side effects of basically shutting down an economy. And of course, if you shut down an economy, the economy shut down. And this is the first time in the history that we did this type of experiments. So the question is, when you shut down an economy and then you try to switch on the economy,
yes,
the engine we start again or not?
Because, so Paolo, that's interesting. You just said that this is an experiment of shutting down the economy. Why did you use those words? It's interesting.
I mean, basically because no one did, even during the war times, they didn't shut down the economy. It's the first time that the politicians decided unilaterally to shut down the economy. And this is really, for me, an unprecedented thing that was never been done. And I have hard times, to be honest with you guys, to find a justification for this decision. Because if you look at the global statistics, having few thousand of people more deaths per year is part of the statistics, to be honest. And this is, if you look at the statistics also, this is not, this is certainly an exogenous shock that came from a virus, but this is a healthcare system, systemic crisis, basically.
But that's a good point. So, Naj, you know, what would you say? So what Paolo's saying is that this is actually, when it comes down to it, it's never been done before in history, despite many, many different big issues. But also, this is a healthcare problem, lack of investment, wouldn't you say?
And I think, yeah, you know, in many ways, I don't think Paolo and I are that far apart. I mean, I agree, you know, sorry, just stepping back to the first point that Paolo made about the damage that the lockdown is going to do beyond just protecting the healthcare front line. Or as a result of protecting the healthcare front line, I should say rather. We know that with Ebola, more people died of food and starvation post you know, the actual impact of the local situation there. You know, many died as a result of Ebola, but more died because they died of hunger and starvation. So, you know, and that's a microcosm of what's happening right now. Here we're talking, you know, pretty much the whole world. Yes, I think it is. It's as much as it's showing the fragmentation and vulnerability of our supply chains, it's also showing the underinvestment potentially and the shortcomings of the different healthcare systems. And from an experiment point of view, the fact is that, you know what, I don't want to get too political here, but, you know, countries have been able to see this coming for quite some time. It's watching a car crash in slow motion or in the rear view mirror. You know, people behind you are coming up and piling in behind you, knowing that there's a car crash happening in front of you. So they've all been able to learn from each other. The problem is that our respective healthcare systems in each and every country, and we are talking primarily the developed world here, don't forget, we're not seeing much reporting in those developing markets, sub-Saharan Africa and the poorer markets of Asia. And the challenge with that is that there are some countries that have clearly invested more in their healthcare systems, have differences with their healthcare systems. In some cases, the healthcare systems are fragmented in a way that may well be too expensive in normal times, and I can think of Germany in this instance. But the way that the German healthcare system set up means that it's ideally suited to dealing with a situation like this, and hence, you know, though I know the numbers are questionable and we still have to understand the numbers and we're still looking at the numbers because the reporting varies, as we're told repeatedly, it's clear that Germany is probably handling the situation better than pretty much every European country, at least.
Of course, they have, if I may say, they have a six seats of intensive care units every 1,000 people. The UK, they have 2.1 intensive care units every 1,000 people. Italy, they have 2.4, and so on and so forth. You see from the statistics that the country that invested more in the healthcare system, they have a ridiculous low amount of that toll, because they are prepared to shock, to exogenous shocks. And this history of medicine that teach us that every 30, 40 years, there is a virus spread, a new virus that spread around. So we are basically investing billions every year, trillions every year in innovation, in a digital transformation. And we didn't do much to invest in the digital transformation of the healthcare system. You know, in Switzerland, how they count the death toll? Do you know how they transfer the information to the federal government? Which technology they use in Switzerland? Can you guess what?
Email.
Fax machine.
Fax machine.
Fax machine.
Actually, I'm very surprised, Paolo. I was expecting Telegram.
Yeah, just for any viewers and for Geri as well, a fax machine is very old. I mean, I can't even describe it. A bit of paper goes in one end and comes out the other end, doesn't it? And that's a good point. So let's get on to technology. So guys, you know, some really interesting backgrounds there, and you know, we're not saying good and bad about different countries, etc. We're just sort of talking about experiences, but we're sort of all in the blockchain industry and emerging technologies. So, you know, Geri, so thinking about what technology we have now, and you're a blockchain company, what sorts of things can blockchain help with now? So a few of the ideas, you know, big issues we talked about, where are you seeing some of the new business models, the new solutions that blockchain is enabling?
Yes, so the key, I think, is about digitalization of supply chain and transparency, what's happening in the market. We already have seen that thousands of masks are being produced. At the same time, there are counterfeit masks being produced in the market. Yeah. We're seeing the same thing when it comes to medicine. And for this type of thing, blockchain can be very helpful in trying to avoid counterfeiting. The way we see it, and this is from what we've seen from the market, there's two type of thinking right now. It's short-term type of thinking, how we're gonna get out of this mess and how blockchain can help in the short run, and it's long-term type of thinking. And in the long run, what we're seeing is that at least in the fashion market, in luxury sector, we get CEOs thinking they're reviewing everything, how it has been done so far. So they're thinking, what's the future is going to look like? And we're seeing that sustainability is taking like a center focus, and climate change, because if you think about climate change, is very similar. It's another invisible enemy. Yeah. Which kills us much slower than COVID-19 is killing us. And future leaders they know that this is going to be the big fight after COVID-19.
A question for you, Geri, and sort of, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I just saw that Primark is, so Primark, a fast fashion retailer in the UK and parts of Europe, they're sort of, in essence, complaining that, you know, all the stores are closed and they're not selling anything. But doesn't the whole premise of fast fashion, i.e. you buy something very quickly, you wear it, and then you throw it in the bin, doesn't that show that in this day and age now, and the new world that's going to appear, should we be doing fast fashion? Should that even exist in the new world we're going to? Bearing in mind what we've just seen and what we're about to go through.
Yes, I think it's a bit, the mentality and consumer behavior is shifting. Yeah. It's shifting towards purpose rather than immediate need. Yeah. And we already seen that we were seeing that before the COVID-19 happened, with Gen Z in particular, shifting their behavior. And now we believe that the companies that will survive this crisis, if they are purpose-led, it's a higher chance of them surviving. And in the future, we are anticipating that even the companies that were not as purpose-led before, they will shift their behavior towards treating their employees in fair manners, producing, like using the right standards, and this is what we anticipate. What happened in the past, I think, this has been a very good opportunity for everyone to pause and think what they did in the past that was right, what they did in the past that wasn't right, and what they're going to do in the future to be in a position to win.
Nice. Nikhil, from a, sort of more automation and future thinking, so, what do you think is going to change? What things will change over the next few weeks and months?
Well, I think one of the things, one of the impacts we've of course seen as a result of this has been the tremendous, loss in jobs that have been going on throughout the entire economy, right? And when doing a bit of research into, the types of jobs that have been lost and so forth, they tend to be those that are prone to being automated away, right? So these are ones that are disproportionately lost in these in recessionary periods. And actually, it turns out that recessions are a great sort of burst moment for influxes of great deals of automation. And that's something that's been seen, in previous recessions, and in particular, the recession that's going to probably be coming as a result of the situation we're in now may see a precedence in automation that was not seen previously in history, because of the convergence of a number of different emerging technologies all at the same time. Because unlike previous times, now we have blockchain here, we also have artificial intelligence, and we have Internet of Things devices really taking off. So all of these three things converging may see, not only, and you're not only talking about, kind of low-skilled work, but you're also talking about things like, people, knowledge workers potentially, that may have their jobs lost, that may not also be coming back.
So I think it's a good point for supply chains and retail especially, because what you're saying, Nikhil, about, IoT, blockchain, AI, ML, cloud technologies, etc. We are at the stage where we've been using these technologies for many years, not hundreds, but, a good few years. And bringing those together, this crisis, as Geri said as well, makes you stop and think. Whatever you do in personal life and business life, you stop and think. And I suppose one of the messages that I think is very key that we need to get across to the viewers is that, yes, it's not great at the moment, but good things always come out of these eventually, and opportunities, without question, new opportunities appear. And I think looking at these technologies together are sort of really key. So we're going to wrap up in a second, so because I'm conscious of time for the viewers. It'd just be good to get from each of you, just what would you be suggesting that retailers should look at and supply chain now, and then what are we going to talk about next time? So Paolo.
Yeah, no, if I may add something on this, so because we talk about the recessions, we don't know if it will be a recession or a depression.
Good point.
Because the statistics that the IMF show us a few days ago, it looks very much like a depression. And depression means that we will have a long queue and the recovery will be very, very slow. And I think that the policymakers, they don't have the instruments the proper instrument to cope with this crisis, because this is not a financial crisis like in 2008. So injecting liquidity into the market is not enough. So you need to sustain with the new tools, maybe also with the new technologies, those business that are in needs now that create GDP growth. And because we had a low interest rate for the last decades, and this low interest rate, by the side effect, increase the debt level of those corporate companies, so that they have much higher debt than 10 years ago. So if you don't have those companies that generate value in the supply chain, in the value chain globally, you are not able to solve this situation. So I wish maybe we can talk next time about new tools that can help those business in needs now to wrap
get
up
ready.
and restart.
Paolo, and I was going to say your perspective, and maybe this is for next time, Antony, combining what Nikhil and Paolo have just spoken about, the fact is that this automation may well be the source for which wealth generation. But how do we then distribute that wealth? Because as you say, I think the most common job in the US is truck driver, right? Combining supply chain and the most common job and the automation side of it. If we lose the truck drivers in the US, that's a huge swathe of the population that's going to be out of work. So how do we redistribute the wealth that automation is going to bring about? And that goes back to your point about depression and how do we come out of it and end up creating a fair and more equal society. To close, if I just finish my closing point, then I think we've already touched on the phrase trust. I think supply chains need to be indifferent to trust or neutral to trust, whichever way you want to look at it. I think we definitely need to talk about resilience. I don't think globalization is going to go away. It's going to be a different form of globalization. What globalization looks like, maybe we will get rid of fast fashion or those industries that have pushed for rapid supply chains where supply chains have to work quickly and fast and have lots of waste within them. That may well go away, but we'll still be global. And then finally, I think automation has a huge part to play, and that will need to be thought about in terms of how we redistribute the wealth that automation brings about as well.
Cool. Geri?
So I think what's going to happen, we will see digitalization of supply chain and to shift towards sustainability, because we think that the next big battle is going to be the climate change.
Cool. And Nikhil?
And just echoing what you were talking about, Naj, about redistribution of wealth. I mean, that's something like a universal basic income, right? Is something that could be thought about in that particular circumstance. I think something that would be interesting to talk about for businesses is how to build resilience, right? Because there's certainly talk about contingency plans and so forth. How do you make sure going forward that these are in place? And automation is one aspect of that. But there's also, in the post-COVID world, if globalization also decreases, what are going to be the opportunities, right? In terms of the kind of, government may come and say, okay, well, we should be self-reliant to a certain extent on certain things. And therefore these things will need to be, businesses will need to be able to provide for them.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, that's brilliant. So massive thank you to everyone. So it's been a great short session for the first one. I think for me, the next session sounds like it's about building resilience in the supply chain. Naj mentioned that 100 times during this session, but I think it's true. It's actually, when you think about it and just reflect on our discussion, this is now about resilience for the future, and it's probably the bit that we've missed in the past. We didn't build resilience into things. We've gone headlong into technologies and globalization, and we didn't really think about it. I would suggest, I'm sure somebody may do. So let's do building resilience in the supply chain for our next session. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll ask you if you put comments down below in the YouTube section, the comments section of questions, comments. We'll try and do this as a live session next time. Technology-wise didn't help us this time, but if you put your comments, we can then next session, answer some of your questions and start to sort of help you deal with this crisis. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to the team on the call.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.